to the January 9th, 2025 work session for the Rutherford County School Board. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Frances Rosales.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we bow our heads for a moment of silence, I would like everyone to think of the family of Keith Reed, who was a custodian at Central Magnet and has recently passed away. Bow your heads, please. Thank you. Next, we have the agenda. If you just ever want a second to look at everything, if you have any questions, comments. If not, we can move on to the consent agenda. Any questions or comments there? We do have a speaker for this evening, but he seems to be stuck in traffic, so we will let him come up and speak when he gets here. So we will move along. Yes, Ms. Rosales.
The speaker called me and said that he had something that he needed. He had made a request for a copy. I don't know, Ms. Williams, did you receive an email? Yes, everybody has. Okay, perfect. He had called and wanted to make sure that we got it. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll just move on. There's no public comment. Number 8, legal.
Transfer student under discipline, number 1, and we only have one this time. The board's been requested to admit a transfer student under discipline from another school system under discipline. The student was expelled for intentional repeated harassment of school staff. According to policy 6.318, the board may deny admissions of any student except those in state custody. When a student transfers to another school system under suspension or expulsion, director of school's recommendation is to deny.
Number 9, human resources.
Human Resources, this is a request for 1 additional nursing staff due to increasing medical procedures at one of our larger high schools. Health and Services Department is requesting 1 new school nurse position. We honestly probably need 3 additional, but I need more revenue to be able to do that. So we really need 4, but this one is the most dire of the 4.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, Mr.
What school would this be for?
Oakland High School.
Oakland. Thank you. Okay. Number 10.
Number 10 is just continuing. We do have a policy meeting next week, but part of TSBA's Board of Distinction program recognizes school boards for their work. School boards that seek this designation must meet specified requirements in 4 key areas: planning, policy, promotion, and board development. Attached in tab 3 is the 5th portion of our school board policy agenda, which is personnel. And one of the requirements to continue with TSBA's Board of Distinction is an annual review and maintenance of the entire policy manual. The way we do our policy, any board member at any point or staff member can move any policy to the policy committee, but this is just the official review of Section 5.
Number 11, Charter Review Committee.
We received 2 letters. Is that right, Mr. McCann, Dr. McCann? 2 letters. Can you tell us who they are, when our next deadlines are, if you don't mind? Okay. So you have the review committee below, and we are asking for approval that aligns with policy as well.
Okay.
How many parents did we actually have end up applying? And then we do a lottery. Yep.
Number 12, engineering and construction.
Poplar Hill Elementary grading change order number 2. Engineering and Construction has agreed to the final grading change request for demo plus construction. Per our letter dated August 7th, 2024, change order number 2 is to be for $35,850. This will complete the grading package contract for bid number 3711.
Number 2,
Eagleville Soccer Field Work Request. Principal Tim Pettigo is requesting to regrade the property adjacent to the school for a soccer field. The grading process, equipment, and labor is being donated, and the school will be responsible for the cost of the fuel needed. Estimated cost is $2,000. As part of the project, the school will begin to raise funds in an irrigation system, and the cost for the appropriate 2-inch tap meter and the $30,000 estimated for the field system. This work will require to have TDEC approval. The request is at no cost to the board. Engineering and Construction has reviewed the request and has no objection.
number 3,
Laverne High School Nutrition Painting Project. School Nutrition Department has been reviewing options to upgrade the appearance of the cafeteria serving lines for a couple of years. Currently, they're requesting to begin a school serving line project with Laverne High School as the first one. The cost for this project is $45,200.75 and will come from the fund balance and will not require additional funds. The Engineering and Construction Department has reviewed the request and has no objection. For our new board members in Fund 143, we have a large fund balance that we are only supposed to carry 6 months of operating funds in, so we try to spend this down every year.
number 4, and I'm personally happy to see this.
Daniel McKee Exterior and Interior Mural Paint Request. Principal Nicole Sturbins is requesting to allow the Experience Community Church to clean and paint the exterior of the building and paint the interior murals in the interior. Total cost for the request is $19,300, is being funded by the church at no cost to the board. Engineering and Construction has reviewed the request and has no objection. We want to thank Experience Community Church, which is probably the beginning of a pretty good partnership with them.
Yes, they have a very big heart and a very nice congregation that really wants to help our school system. Very glad to have them.
Ms. Maxwell,
Yes.
how many different murals have they done? I know they did one at Holloway.
That's the main one that I know of.
Yeah, okay. It's awesome.
The only other mural that I know, there's several that are sacred across the county. I know Smyrna Middle is one that is never to be touched. I know that one. Outside of that one, I don't know the other ones that are not to be touched anywhere.
Gotcha. Okay, number 13, resolutions.
Fast growth stipends. Mr. Reed, you want to come up with this one?
There are 2 resolutions that the board is asked to consider for Thursday night. The first of these is one related to fast growth funds that the state had adopted as a portion of the TISA funding last year. As you know, the state did set up some funding for fast growth districts. In the last fiscal year, though, the funding was insufficient to fully fund that, and the infrastructure component of the fast growth funding did not get funded at all because they used up all the funds for the stipends. There was no money left over for the infrastructure portion of the growth of the fast growth component of TISA. So what this first resolution is asking the legislature to consider doing is increasing funding for fast growth stipends and fast growth infrastructure in this fiscal year. So this first resolution says, whereas the Rutherford County School Board of Education is a local government body representing public education to the students and families of Rutherford County, Tennessee, whereas according to the Rutherford County Chamber of Commerce, the Rutherford County has averaged an annual population growth rate of nearly 3.4% over the past 10 years. And as Rutherford County Schools has seen an average increase of nearly 2.3% in average daily membership from the 2018-19 year to the 2022-2023 school year. And whereas TISA includes provisions for additional funding for rapidly growing school districts such as Rutherford County Schools, and whereas one such provision is the Fast Growth Stipend, and whereas the Fast Growth Stipend is intended to provide additional funding to the districts whose TISA allocations increased by more than 1.25% compared to the previous year, and whereas while the Fast Growth Stipend formula calculates the amount of additional funding a qualifying district should receive, the total funding available for those stipends is limited by the fixed amount appropriated by the state of Tennessee each year. And whereas Rutherford County Schools is one of the fastest growing school systems in Tennessee and would have received $7,557,111 from the fast growth stipend for the 2022-2024 fiscal year under the initial TISA guidelines, yet only received $6,864,089 in 2024 due to the large number of school systems qualifying for said fast growth stipend funds under the 1.25% growth threshold for said funds. And whereas fast-growing districts in Tennessee qualified for approximately $38.5 million in fast growth funds in Tennessee in 2023/24, but there was only $35 million funded for fast growth schools in 2023/24. And whereas the fast growth funds in 2023/24 were planned to also include $10 million in funding for fast growth infrastructure, but given that said $10 million was included within the $35 million overall fast growth funds, none of the fast growth infrastructure could be funded in 23/24. And whereas the state's current appropriation for fast growth stipends is insufficient to fully fund the calculated amounts for all eligible districts, resulting in prorated distributions that fall short of meeting the needs of rapidly growing districts such as Rutherford County Schools. And whereas the shortfall in funding disproportionately impacts districts with sustained rapid growth, leaving them unable to adequately address the increased demands for additional classrooms, teachers, and resources to support their growing student populations. And whereas in the 23-24 fiscal year, approximately $48.5 million would have been needed to fully fund the fast growth stipends and fast growth infrastructure. And whereas, given the rapid growth many portions of the state continue to experience, it can be expected that $50 million will be necessary to fully fund the fast growth stipends and fast growth infrastructure components of TISA for the 25-26 fiscal year. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Rutherford County Board of Education that respectfully request the Tennessee General Assembly consider fully funding the fast growth stipend and fast growth infrastructure components of the TISA formula by appropriating the amount of $50 million for the 25-26 fiscal year to ensure that all eligible school districts receive the full value of their calculated stipends and for their percentage of fast growth infrastructure. So that's the proposed resolution, and Mr. Tidwell is kind of a point person getting this put together and giving information for this proposed resolution. He's worked hard on this. Obviously, they funded. I think the legislature's heart was in the right place in trying to fund the fast growth funding that they provided for in the last fiscal year. Just with the number of systems that qualify for it, there was not enough money to go around to fully fund that after all the systems met that 1.25% threshold. So what this resolution does is requesting the legislature increase the funding for that to possibly $50 million to hopefully provide sufficient funds to fund that for this upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you.
So that's the first resolution. Fast growth stipend funds can be used for just fund teachers, employment positions, general school system expenses. Infrastructure is for capital type improvement.
Yes, Ms. Rosales.
No, go ahead. He's probably going to explain what I was going to say.
The legislature allocated $10 million if there were $10 million available after fast growth infrastructure is available, and there was not $10 million available. But it would go straight to infrastructure if it was.
So, Dr. Sullivan, I think what he's trying to understand is why there's two different types of funds. So one fund is based for the students, is based on your enrollment of growth, and that's where the stipends are. And the other one is based on your infrastructure. And the way this works is that the student stipends growth will be allocated first before the infrastructure stipend. So whatever amount is there is what's going to be allocated for the students, and whatever is left over is going to be for based on the student enrollment of growth for that academic year. And then whatever's left over is going to go towards infrastructure. So that's why it's set up differently in that sense. But you're correct the funding can go for teachers and things like that, but the way it works is based on enrollment numbers. As the year progresses, how many new students are coming into the district is what determines that.
Any other questions? Okay, you want to go to
The
the
second,
one?
I'm going to go on to the second resolution, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
The second resolution is a resolution supporting House Bill 0022 regarding mandatory public comment periods at meetings of governing bodies. And this, I'll first go back, I'll read the proposed House Bill 22. And House Bill 22 is a new proposed statute the House is taking up. And they're proposing that a governing body shall, for each public meeting, reserve a period for public comment to provide the public with the opportunity to comment on matters that are germane to the items on the agenda for the meeting, and on any matter that is germane to the jurisdiction of the governing body, regardless of whether such matter is an item on the agenda for the meeting. So that is the proposed House bill, which changes the law as it currently is, because as the statute currently reads, the public comment could be restricted to only items on the agenda. So this broadens the right for people to make public comment to items that are germane to other things that could have been on the agenda but may not necessarily be on the agenda.
Okay.
So that's the House bill that's being proposed. So this resolution says, whereas local school boards are charged with making decisions that impact students, families, educators, and communities, and whereas the opportunity for members of the public to address school boards on matters of concern is a fundamental component of open and participatory government, and whereas the ability of members of the public to voice their concerns, offer insights, and share diverse perspectives with school boards is essential to ensuring decisions are informed, transparent, and reflective of community needs. And whereas the General Assembly is considering House Bill 0022, which seeks to enhance public engagement by requiring governing bodies to provide opportunities for public comment at their meetings, and whereas the legislature underscores the importance of ensuring that citizens have a platform to share their thoughts with their local school board, now there be it resolved by the Rutherford County Schools Board of Education, and that it expresses its support for the principles and intent of House Bill 0022, which aims to promote greater public participation and uphold the values of transparency and accountability in governance. That's the second resolution that will be presented on Thursday.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Ball.
Whoops, I'm supposed to turn that on. Jeff, in the original bill, that public comment period bill, is there an outline in it that says how many minutes, or is it just whatever each body deems necessary? Is that how it's left
Each
up?
body makes their own separate rules with regard to that. Yes.
Is that, you know, when I was on PBA, you know, maybe one person would show up once every 6 months, so there's no obligation to say we're going to reserve 20 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour. It's just whatever. They leave that up to each individual
They leave it up to the body.
committee or
to decide.
body to do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Ms. Maxwell?
Yes, Mr. Rosales.
Does this apply to the General Assembly when they meet with the committees? Because right now, it's just germane to the items on the agenda. And like right now, when we brought up the whole thing about the ESL, we couldn't show up at the Capitol and say, hey, there is something that it's happening down at a local level with issues. We can't just show up and then just sign up to speak unless if it's there. And if they don't take the bill that addresses that concern, then there's no way to talk about it in an open forum, an open public. So I would like to add some in there that says that it's applicable with our legislation assembly, because the whole reason why they came out with this whole thing is because of what happened in 2023, I think it was 2023, with the whole Tennessee 3. So I would like to add that information.
Well, yeah, that's fine. If the board wants that be a motion to amend, we could take out up on Thursday to add that to this proposed resolution.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Darby.
I think, would that not be something that the sponsor and author of the bill would have to add into their bill? Or are you just wanting to add it to our resolution?
We're adding to our resolution to say that that is what we are taking a stand, that if they're making the law about how our meetings should run, then it shall also apply to them as well. Because right now, you cannot show up to the Capitol, and it's a governing body, in public comments. You have to speak on the items of the agenda. The only way to get anything to speak about is if you work with a legislator to create a bill so the conversation is there to be included. So what we did yesterday to speak with our legislatures about things that are happening in specifically to Rutherford County, the only way that we can talk to them in an open public forum is if it's in the agenda in equivalent to a bill. So you cannot just show up. And the whole reason what all this started is because of what happened in 2023 with the whole Tennessee 3, because of the decorum and order. And that's what created all that.
I'm just trying to understand if you're wanting her to amend her bill to put that in the bill language, or if you're wanting us to amend our resolution in asking that she do that through the resolution.
That's exactly correct what you just said.
Which one?
What, the latter part, the resolution asking, because the whole thing what this resolution says is what you're taking a stand and saying what you want amended in the bill as well. So through this resolution is what we're asking, is for them to also make them to be applicable to all governing bodies, not just selecting a few and requiring a few governing bodies to do it. It should be all governing bodies.
Ms. Maxwell?
Yes, Mr.
Jeff, could you read that? I think it's subset 2 again, the change that's being made.
In the law itself?
Yes.
So the proposed change says a governing body shall, for each public meeting, reserve a period for public comment to provide the public with the opportunity to comment, as 1 and 2. 1, on matters that are germane to the items on the agenda for the meeting, and 2, on any matter that is germane to the jurisdiction of the governing body, regardless of whether such matter is an item on the agenda for the meeting.
Do you see in there any specific carve-out for the General Assembly? Because they are a governing body.
There are different rules that apply to General Assembly, so I understand what Ms. Rosales is saying. Whether governing body would include the legislature or not, I can't give you an opinion. I cannot tell you for sure on that today.
Interesting.
On that without researching that, because the legislature does have a separate set of rules with respect to how they govern the House and Senate. So if you're wanting to have a resolution to say we also think these same principles should apply to the state legislature, we can add that to the resolution if that's what the board wants to do, and say, basically we support the principles and intent of House Bill 22 for all the governing bodies in Tennessee, including the state legislature, if we want to make that change. Okay. So if that's something you want to propose, we can add that to this resolution.
Okay, well, I'd brought this, and the reason I brought this is because there was some vagueness that it was, there was a particular policy that's brought up, and it was just saying that we need to stick to items. Public comment must be directly to the items to the agenda, which I disagreed with. So I asked the representative just to bring clarity to this, and they added the line, which you just read, just saying that basically if it's germane to the governing body, under their jurisdiction of items, then you can speak about public comment to that. You can't come up here and talk about astrology and everything else, but as far as anything school board related, they could come chat about that. I felt that was reasonable, so I asked them if there was anything else I could do other than continue to push for it, and they asked for a resolution. So that's where we ended up here, and that's where it affects us directly, which is what I'm most concerned with. But I guess we need to look into whether or not the language is already in there. I'm assuming governing body would include the General Assembly, but maybe it doesn't. Like you said, maybe there's different rules that apply.
Who's going to make the decision whether or not it qualifies or not?
The legislature.
I mean,
Well, the state legislature makes their laws, so that's ultimately who makes
I
them.
mean, like here, who makes the decision whether or not it's germane or those type of things? Who's going to be the person?
I do. Yep.
can we do to avoid dog and pony show?
Just be respectful.
Change the,
Everyone should be respectful.
The reason why these came out, and the General Assembly wrote about germane to the items of the agenda, it was because of what happened in 2023, that it caused some of the session not to lose its decorum. So they wanted to bring it back a little bit. So that's great. I think I'm all for decorum, but if they're making decisions for us to conduct our meetings, then it's a governing body, and we're included as a governing body, then this rule shall also apply to the General Assembly. Because a constituent cannot show up to the Capitol to speak about an item that's not on the agenda. And the way it works right now is if it's a bill that's being presented that is going to be debated upon. And even if they have to go out of session just so that there can be some dialogue and debate.
Ms. Sharp?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy New Year, board members. It was my understanding this didn't have anything to do with the Memphis 3. It had everything to do with, and that's why it had everything to do with other bodies in the entire state of Tennessee not allowing their constituents to come and talk. And that's why they felt they needed to clarify what they should be able to do. They should be having, we've got 30 minutes. There should be 30 minutes for our constituents to come and speak to us. There should be something on the agenda, and it shouldn't have to be on the agenda. So that's why when we talked to Elaine Davis and some of the other ones that sponsored the bill, she wanted to write the bill and say, hey, all governing bodies in the state of Tennessee should offer this minimum where constituents can come and express their First Amendment rights, and it doesn't have to be on the agenda for you to talk about it. That's what we were told when last year when we were talking about 1404. It didn't have anything to do with the Memphis 3. It was because there were other governing bodies across the state, city council, just different bodies that were public bodies that were paid by taxpayers. They were not allowed to come and address their board members. City council members, school board members, it was just not to the school board. It's to all governing bodies. And I think that's what it's saying. All bodies should give, because all bodies have an agenda, they should give X amount of money, X amount of time, and X amount of people to be able to come and express their First Amendment rights.
We haven't had that issue here. We've always allowed public comment. We've had 30 minutes since I've started watching them 7, 8 years ago. I don't know what they did 20 years ago, but we've always enjoyed that. And anyone can come and talk with us about anything they want to that has anything to do with school systems. So, I do believe it was other systems. It wasn't our system. But, this is what the law is, and I understand that, they're asking us to support it. And so, are there any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Reed. Also, our speaker just made it in. I saw him sneak in a minute ago, so I would like to have Mr. Mike Sparks come. Representative Mike Sparks, he's here to speak to us about something he's got coming up, and we did receive copies. Yes. We did get copies.
We got them.
Hey, we understand.
Yes, we do.
Driving every day.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Board. One of the things that let me first thank the Board for last night, having the great discussion we had. I thought it was awesome, and we need more of it. A lot of myriad of issues that y'all are faced with, the state's faced with, county commission faced with. But one of those issues is shortage of school bus drivers. And I didn't realize that a lot of folks here are drivers, is what I was told. But a few years ago, we passed legislation where the minimum age was 25. I'm proposing to take to 21. I did get off the phone with Gary Lilly with TOS, and he said, Dr. Sullivan, you were his favorite school superintendent across the state. So he seems to be in favor. I've talked to others that seem to be in favor. Other states, they allow drivers as young as 18. I don't want to go that far. I'm just saying 21. And I think this would help with the shortage, give some young people an opportunity to find a career. And I'm always reminded, Dr. Sullivan may know this, I was impressed with the school superintendent in Cleveland that was school superintendent and went and started driving the bus because they had no drivers. What, do you remember his name?
Russell Dyer is now in Collierville. He took Gary Lilly's place.
Yeah, just great guy, and I always thought that was very honorable for him to do that. But that's just the main piece of legislation I want to talk to you about, and legal finally got that drafted. Another element that I'm wanting feedback from y'all and feedback from drivers and owners is like a mentorship program that each new driver would have a mentor assigned to them. I would think folks would like that, but also I'm wanting y'all's feedback and TOS's feedback and Tennessee School Board Association, their feedback as well. But I know drivers and owners are having a tough time, and I know y'all are having a tough time of trying to balance a budget and build schools and deal with overcrowding. And that's the first issue that I've got. On the second page, I've got a couple of other issues if you want me to go into them.
Ms. Maxwell?
Yes, Mr.
Can I have you expound a little bit on what you're talking about as far as a mentor program, what that might look like?
Well, one of the issues I hear is the childhood behavior issues. I see where Wilson County is asking parents to be like bus monitors. And if you had to go pay bus monitors, no telling what that would cost. But, you know, I'm hearing the language barriers from drivers that are trying to tell kids to behave, and sometimes kids don't understand them. And, but I think the mentorship, whether even a driver is just having a stressful day, maybe there's somebody he could reach out to or she could reach out to just kind of decompress, you know. I would say being a school bus driver is one of the hardest jobs, I would dare say, in this county. My late father, when he left the Air Force, he became a driver. Didn't last long, put it that way. He just couldn't deal with, I don't think, the kids. But, and kids were, behavior-wise, I would think Mr. Vaughn would agree, probably didn't have the behavior problems you did 40 years ago like you do today. But that's what I'm thinking of, Caleb.
Yes, sir.
Something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Jarrett.
Representative Sparks, just off the top of my head, because I have a son that's 24-year-old, and I know the insurance is quite expensive on them. Do you expect to see an insurance, if it is lower to 21, do you expect, and maybe you're not the one to ask, maybe it's the bus driver contractor?
Maybe an owner or driver could speak to that.
Because I know that it's more expensive when they're younger.
Any other questions for Mr. Representative Sparks? Thank you.
Did you want to get in the next? I've got two other captions I was just going to keep open for y'all if you needed them. One is dealing with mental health, and I think most would agree that I think we've got a mental health crisis. We're seeing an uptick, sadly, of suicide, and sadly, it seems like, you know, a lot of folks don't, you know, want to talk about it. I've seen an empty issue. We heard about it. You know, we had the conference at Motlow College here recently, and had several speakers, and y'all had some good representation there. The chancellor came in for me, and you know, some of the stories I hear are really just you know, heartbreaking, and I couldn't imagine a parent having to deal with you know, loss of a child. So, and it's not just mental health with students. I mean, it's college students, it's adults. I just think I'll have a caption if y'all have any ideas of what we can do. I know the chancellor, she's allocating about $500,000 at just the university level at the community colleges. That sounds like a lot of money, but in the scheme of 7 million people across the state, that's, you know, not much. But just like to get y'all's feedback. And another caption I've got open is, and maybe it's a TASER study that we could do with y'all's support. Just looking at the overcrowding, what could be done to free up seats? I know that y'all may not like the governor's education scholarship bill, but not here to talk about that. But, maybe that frees up seats. Maybe there's some partnerships we could do with, for space. Maybe there's encouraging homeschooling. If we just freed up 2% of incoming students, that's a lot of students, So I've got these captions open, and we'd just like to get some kind of resolution from y'all. Toss seems supportive. I think Ben Torres with the School Board Association, I think he seems to be equally as supportive as well.
Madam Chairperson.
Yes, Mr. Vaughn.
I spent a lot of last week and last Saturday dealing with a close friend of mine whose son committed suicide. Early 40s, left a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful kids, good business, no note, and nobody really knows why. But there's something that we miss. And I'm like you, I think that's one thing that we've got to really look into, is to see what we can do. And the way that they talked about these issues could have started back in high school. And he's in the early 40s. Yeah. And some of this stuff is generational or whatever, but we've got to do something to help these kids break that cycle and overcome it. And what that is, I don't know. I think it's going to take all of us. Because, it impacted the whole community. It was just Saturday, he holds just hugging his wife, and she just crumbles in your arm. She just can't understand it, and it just breaks your heart. And how do you explain that to his kids? We need to do something, because it's going to get worse.
I was just going to say that in the vein of what you were talking about, I had a teacher reach out to me, I think it's been a while, maybe 2 months ago, to share about what we're talking about, because apparently there was a student that had committed suicide. It didn't happen in the school building, but it was outside of the home, and impacted the kids themselves who are dealing with them, and they were coming to her room because she has a corner there where kids can come in and just reflect, and they can read inspirational books, whatever. But it's not just the family that's going through it, but then our students are also impacted as well when it happens to one of their peers. And so I know Amy Baltimore, I've been talking to her about it a little bit, and I know that's something that she's been looking at to see if there's tools that we can provide teachers to prevent a child from doing exactly that, saving a life.
You don't always see the signs. It was this time last year, I was at a school board meeting, and I had 3 missed calls from a dear friend from high school. And when I got on the phone, she's crying and screaming and told me that her son had shot himself. Yeah. And there's a lot more, we read that this person passed away, this person passed away. A lot of the times when they're young, parents, you don't know that they took their own life. They don't know the struggles they were, because families, they keep it close to their hearts. And it is an epidemic, but you're right, it can start as a young person, and they never can shake it, and then it comes out when they get much older. But it is something that I definitely support you, Mike, on this. It's mental health issues have only been exacerbated since the shutdown, and even though we really weren't shut down compared to other places of the country, but COVID did a number on our young people and our adults. So I support you in that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Mr.
I appreciate you bringing it up. It's something as an educator, and that's the lens I'll take from now. I think, unfortunately, mental health sometimes gets stuck in the political realm, and that's where I struggle with, is that we don't want to be students' parents. We want to be their educators.
Yes, sir.
But we also spend time with our kids and realize sometimes when things aren't going the way they need to, and we need support and the tools to be able to point kids and their parents in the right direction, and what do we do if a parent is not involved? Just saying that, oh, well, the parent's not involved, that's up to the parent. You know, if a kid takes their life because of that, that's not okay.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you trying to tackle this.
I mean,
Go ahead,
it's one
Butch.
thing that, I don't know, I think we have a real need with the system to hire a grant writer. This is just one area I think that, I know that you're aware. There's a tremendous amount of grants to help fight this epidemic. And I just think it's something that we could really benefit from, to have somebody to look at those grants, because there's millions of dollars out there. And for topics such as this, because, you know, we don't know what the solution is. And I really believe we could hire a grant writer, could really research it and find out, and bring us a lot of good programs in here that, you know, grants are free. So but I appreciate what you're doing, because I know y'all are working at the state level too.
Well, I'm probably the least qualified person to talk about the subject, to be honest with you. You know, we hosted, I think most of y'all have heard this letter. If I could read this letter, Chairman. Yes. This is from the late Dr. Linda Gilbert. I think most of y'all knew Linda Gilbert. And we hosted a mental health town hall at my church, Parkway Baptist, about 4 years ago. And I'd asked her after the conference, I said, what's the silver bullet? What is the one thing we could do that could help? And she wrote me this letter, and she says, I apologize for being delayed in responding. She said, she goes on to say, please, thank Representative Sparks for reaching out. Yes, more funding for counselors would certainly help in the social and emotional areas that we're seeing. In other areas, social workers are vital, and many districts cannot afford to fund them. And she goes on to say, I think it would be helpful for him and other legislators to talk with superintendents about the issues we're seeing in very young children. Now, this is what's alarming. Remember, she wrote this four years ago. And then she says, the behaviors of our 6 to 9-year-olds are like nothing we have ever seen before. Remember, this is a 50-year educator that said this. They are disorderly, disruptive. She said they're aggressive, and while we're bringing all resources into play, there's no place for these children to go be assessed and treated. She said, I do feel good about what the Department of Education is trying to do to accomplish the area, the emphasis. And I think this is the key. I don't know much about mental health, but here's what she says. She says emphasis on the whole child. She didn't say part child. She didn't say fraction of child. She said whole child. Then she goes on to say, I'm hopeful the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse will work alongside with them to address the upper tier children for whom there seems to be no answers. Thanks again, Linda. And if folks didn't know Linda Gilbert, she probably passed about 2 weeks after she sent me that letter, you know.
It's a great way.
Well, thank y'all for
Thank you for coming,
listening.
and I appreciate it, and
All right.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
I have one more
Yes,
question
yes,
for
Ms.
Mike.
Stark.
Mike, I have one more question for you. The last one on the, relative to early high school graduation,
Yes, ma'am.
the one that's, you asked about the early high school
Well,
graduation.
you know, I'm just thinking if you could free up some seats. I know my oldest boy, he put himself through night school during the summer and skipped a grade. And I know Dr. Sullivan and I have talked about this. I'm just saying, what can we do creatively that could just free up some seats? And maybe we could do a TASR study, but I've done 2 TASR studies. They're hard to get through the General Assembly because, you know, you're one of 99 asking for it, and they're only going to maybe take up 3 TASR studies. They took up one that I did for affordable housing 2 years ago, and then, or last year, well, 2 years ago now, and then one on childhood sexual trauma, which is a serious issue. There's a direct correlation between drug use, alcohol use, and prison, the population. But I'm just thinking of a TASR study, but if I have y'all support, it's easier to get it passed than if I'm just up there as a Lone Ranger trying to get it done, because I don't have a lobbyist. I don't have 5 lobbyists standing behind me helping me with this kind of stuff.
Real quickly,
So
Just
if
to
I
be
may-
straight up.
If I may, on behalf of Dr. Sullivan, we do have graduates that graduate
Yes.
early. And the point that I would like to make with that is they graduate early, but we get in trouble for it. It's a derogatory mark on us
Yeah.
when they graduate early. So if you want to change something.
Yes, that's what I'm looking, that's what I'm.
Then that
Get
needs,
back
that
to
needs to be changed, because the creative students at Holloway, there's a lot of them that move to Holloway so they can graduate early. And we need some help with that, because Dr. Sullivan can tell you what happens when they do graduate earlier. It is a ding.
The schools get in
Yeah.
trouble.
Does it?
Dr. Sullivan, is that a federal issue with the graduation rate? If we get dinged, or is it a state?
Your graduation rate, as long as they're, it depends on what cohort they're in, and we can get very technical. I can work with Representative Sparks.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Give 'em some details.
Because if it's something that we can do to help with overcrowding, get kids to graduate, and it doesn't ding the school that they're on, then that's very creative thinking outside the box.
And all of our high schools will be on a 4x4 starting next year, so that's going to open up a lot more opportunities as well to get kids more credits to move them out. So,
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's what I was gonna
helps.
say.
No, it's,
I was just gonna say that same very point, that we will be on a block schedule, and there will be a lot more early graduates, most likely starting next year.
Quick update, we have about 500 scheduled to graduate in the fall. Yeah, yeah, that's right, we've
So,
already been
yes,
through
that will be
December.
great.
December happened, Dr. Chastain, it's already gone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank y'all for your time.
No, thank you.
You know, one other thing on mental health, that dealing with kids for over 50 years like I have, one of the biggest problems that I've seen, Mike, and kids, so many kids have no hope anymore. And boy, it just devastates you to talk to kids and just see how they've given up on life at such an early age, like Mike's talking about. And it's getting to be younger and younger, but these kids have no hope. And boy, that's a hard road to go down, I'm telling you. I mean, I can't even imagine, you know.
Yeah.
Things may be bad, but gosh, we can find hope, but these kids have no place to look.
Thank you. Number 14, which is moving into the bus contract.
Mr. Reed?
At the last meeting we had back in December, there was discussion then about having maybe a separate work session to take up the bus contract that will be coming up here for expiration at the end of this fiscal year. That will be June 30th. So we have had historically 4-year term contracts. So every 4 years, we have a new contract coming before the board for approval. So I think it was kind of contemplated that we may have some comments from some of the bus contractors today. So if that's acceptable to the board, we might want to give the bus contractors a chance to speak before the board during this portion of the meeting and voice any thoughts that they have in regards to the upcoming contract. I'll say this, you know, the current contract we have expires June 30th. Usually we do a 4-year contract, so I expect we do the same thing again. The bus contractors have been good partners of our school system. You know, not every county in Tennessee operates their buses the way we do. Some systems own their own buses. Some systems contract with third parties to provide global bus transportation throughout the entire county. Our county has always had a number of independent business people who operate their own buses and operate their routes on behalf of our school system. That system has worked pretty well over the years, and we have a very reliable, safe, dependable bus system in the county. So I don't think there's any idea that that's going to be changed or that system be thrown away. I know there was some RFPs that was done to cover some routes that the school system has had trouble getting anyone to be willing to take. But overall, I think the plan from the system level is to go ahead and continue another 4-year contract with the contractor and to continue to work with them in partnership with regard to the bus operations here in Rutherford County. Now, having said that, there are some new issues that we'll have to take up with respect to this new bus contract that we'll be getting into. One of those is insurance. We have had a change in state legislation that requires bus contractors to carry their own liability insurance. Up until this law has come into effect, the county has always insured our bus contractors and provided liability insurance coverage for the bus contractors and the drivers. And that's the way that's been for decades. But with the new legislation that's been adopted by the state, we're both the bus contractors and we as a school system are obligated now to require the bus contractors to take on the obligation of purchasing their own liability insurance. Now, many of the contractors would have already had property casualty kind of replacement insurance to cover them in the event they have a wreck, a tornado, things like that, where there's damage to the actual bus, property damage type insurance. So many of our bus contractors would have had that in place already. Many of them may have already had their own liability policies in place. If they had several buses, some of our bigger contractors may indeed have already had that in place just for their own protection if something did go wrong. But with this new legislation, all bus contractors will be required by virtue of this change in state law to purchase their own liability insurance. So I don't, and I know our transportation department has looked at some costs on this, and we may see if we can shop it around and see what the cost of the insurance policy will be. And that's something certainly our bus contractors should do too, to see that they can get the best bang for their buck with respect to what insurance they can buy at what price. But one of the major terms that we'll have to add to this contract that we've not had before is the requirement that contractors carry this liability insurance. This liability insurance under the state law is not only required to insure the bus contractor, but also has to insure the school system. So whatever liability policy that these bus contractors have will have to have a provision by which the school system is and the county is an additional insured. So in the event there is a wreck that involves a bus, whenever that bus owner gets sued, then at that point, if they do get sued, that policy will cover the school system, the county, and the bus contractor. So that will be a requirement with respect to the insurance that the contractor has to purchase. So that's one of the major issues that will have to be new to this contract. The other issues that are things we've dealt with before that we may want to adjust is the fuel index. Right now we have a fuel index for diesel fuel, so the price of fuel goes over a certain index price, we pay an additional premium to the bus contractors. So in previous years we have had big fluctuations in fuel prices, and if diesel went up really high, before we had this system with a fuel index, we had recurring issues with having to come back and renegotiate contracts with bus contractors every few months or every year to deal with price adjustments because the market and diesel pricing was just going crazy. So since we've implemented this fuel index, there's been much more stability in respect to for the bus contractors because they know at that point if the price of diesel goes over a certain threshold, that the school system will pay them additional money to pay for that additional fuel cost that they have to run their buses. There has been thought about possibly adding indexes for gasoline, because right now the only index we have is diesel. So there's been thought about adding some indexes for gasoline and possibly even propane. I don't think propane's used that much, but it may be something we want to consider doing as well. So that's another kind of major issue we may want to take up in this contract. The third thing that staff has kind of suggested with respect to the contract is maybe implementing some sort of infraction system. I think Hamilton County has a system by which if there's some repeated problem that a bus contractor has, that the school system has to address, such as the bus contractor not properly running their route, not properly providing for a replacement bus, not providing for replacement drivers, things like that, that maybe there's some sort of warning system by which that contractor gets a warning, but if they have recurring issues with this, after 2 or 3 times, at some point they get fined $50 or $100 or something like that for an incident at some point to motivate the bus contractor to try to rectify that situation. So that's something our transportation department has suggested might be something to work into this contract. The fourth, the major issue with respect to the bus contract will be the seat rates and mileage rates. This is always the major discussion in the bus contract, because this is what actually pays the bus contractors to operate their buses and allow them to operate it in a manner that pays their drivers and hopefully pays for the buses. And hopefully, in the end, after all that, they have a little bit of money left over for themselves to pay their household expenses and make this an occupation for them by which they can actually support their families. The buses are not cheap. Like anything else, buses have become very expensive. So these investments that the bus drivers contractors are making in the buses are $100,000, $150,000 investments, maybe even more now for some of these buses. As these are major commitments that they have to use. Sometimes they borrow money to buy these buses. So they're signing a loan to purchase these buses oftentimes, by which they need to make sure they have a stream of revenue from the bus system, from the school system to pay the buses, pay off the buses with. So we need to keep that in mind with respect to the bus contractors, because the service they're providing to the school system is important to us, but it does present some financial obligations on their part that they have to meet. So they have to have enough revenue coming in to pay for their driver, pay for their fuel, pay for their maintenance expenses, pay for insurance now, and then also pay for the buses themselves, and to keep those up and operational and reliable for the school system. So one of the major discussions we'll always have with respect to the renewals of these contracts is what's the school board able to do with respect to mileage rates and seat rates? What sort of increase do you want to accommodate for that, if any? And typically the school board has increased mileage rates and seat rates when these contracts have come up. So those are big issues from a broad standpoint that will be brought up in the bus contract that we have to address. Now, having said that, I do know they do have a group of the bus contractors have kind of assembled together and have some organization they formed between themselves that represents a fair, I think, more than a majority of the bus contractors. They do have an attorney, I think Gabriel Ragsdale, who has been retained to represent that group. I did talk to him. He would like to kind of just make some general points with respect to issues that the bus contractors would like to see addressed in the contract and their general thoughts in regards to it. And there could be additional bus contractors who may want to voice their thoughts with regard to the bus contract. And if so, I think we want to open the forum for them to do that tonight. And if board members have any questions, certainly you could ask questions of Mr. Ragsdale or any of the bus contractors as they raise any points they want to make. This is the beginning stages of this. So what I would envision is from the conversation we hear tonight, we would go back and formulate a draft contract that we would then propose and present to the bus contractors for the review and look at, and that will ultimately come back to the board for you to look at and to make decisions with respect to what you want to do on the bus contract. So this is just the beginning stages of this, and so we'll take all the comments we're hearing tonight and try to incorporate those into a draft and then bring that back to the board and the contractors for each's consideration.
Dr. Sullivan.
Mr. Reed, can I ask you a question just for organization stance?
Yeah.
I know we normally don't have audience discuss, but I know this is a little bit different. We had talked about, I think Ms. Darden brought up doing it at the end after our work session. I think it's perfectly fine if that's what the board wants to do right now. What I just want to make sure we don't do is that when we have controversial topics like library books, I don't want to start then having librarians and everyone else come up during all that. So I just don't want to start that precedent as long as we're all under the agreement of if bus contractors come up and discuss under an agenda item on the work session that we don't start doing that for other items. Starry, I think it was your request how we started that. I don't mind.
Would you rather we wait until afterwards and gavel out?
I think we should gavel out and then we can gavel back in, because at our last meeting, we had talked about doing it as like a separate, specifically for this subject, so.
Okay,
Yeah, okay.
that's what we'll do then.
Very good. So we'll gavel out the meeting, and then we'll have that work session with the bus
Yes,
contractor.
yeah, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Vaughn.
Help me first go round right here. So listening to what you addressed, and you would, I think, Jeff, be a lot more knowledgeable than I, but the liability insurance thing. Logically, in my mind, if the county's been paying it for them, there's a line item in the budget somewhere already Is it in our budget or is it in the county fund somewhere under their risk assessment?
It's been covered under the county's general liability insurance, so it's been on their side of the ledger and not on ours.
So that's an accounting thing in my mind. I don't know, I'm looking to you to agree with that, but logically to me, it's there, the cost is already there, so it's just transferring over into a different budget area. The county's already doing it right now, so that's.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's going to be apples to apples on
It's
that.
probably not. I gathered that, so I think maybe the real number we have to look at would be the difference between what the county's spending now and what the bus drivers will have to spend.
Yeah,
Does that make any sense?
It does, and I think their concern is going to be anything they move. I'd want to talk to Michael because anything they move is going to increase maintenance of effort, which I know they don't want to do. So that.
Right, so this begins, so there's some accounting issues right here, and how does it affect us with funding elsewhere and all that kind of stuff. So that was one point I wanted to make. The second one was, you said it's a 4-year contract. I can remember years ago, it used to be year to year, 2 years, that kind of thing. Is there a minimum or a maximum we can do? And the reason I ask that, again, the cost of the buses are so high. I know passenger cars now, used to be financed 3 years and 4 years, and, now they're 7, 8 years. I'm not sure how long a capital purchase like this could be financed, but if there was a better guarantee, is there a minimum or a maximum on the contract?
The minimum, there's no minimum.
Okay.
There's been a maximum of 4 years.
There is a maximum of 4 years. Is that state statute? I would also assume that our funding body has to ratify the contract because they are the funding body. They don't?
We did last time because this contract includes raises every year that has a fiscal note. Last time we did this contract, Mr. Lee put it before the county commission so that they were aware of this is what you're agreeing to.
In the past, we've had a possible multi-year, but there was only the 1 year that was set, and then each year the board would set the rate increase if there was one. Some years there wasn't any, but they would, as each budget cycle went through, they would establish what the increase, if there was one, for that year was. This one was the first one that we had a multi-year with all 4 years guaranteed.
Okay, because
up front.
My question would be the funding body would have to enter in kind of guarantee it somehow.
Yes, and that's why we carried it to them, because they had never seen a contract that had 4 years guaranteed.
Okay. I just wanted to get that straight in my mind. Thank you.
Mr. Reed, you may not know that. Why did the law change the liability? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea. It's not anything the school system here was involved with. We learned of it kind of through back channels.
Okay.
When we were in Tampa, there were some people there that were asking us if we owned our buses or not, and they said they're about to change the law. And I don't think they changed it then, but they now have.
Soon after. Any other questions and we will take this up after the meeting. Next, we go to library books.
Dr. Chastain, you ready?
I believe you have a few things in front of you that will reference throughout, and for anybody at home, this will be attached to the agenda as well, the presentation. You should have a handout that looks like this with some headers, and then you should also have the individual reviews that are also attached as part of the agenda. So I had to start with something like this. So for every meeting that we do with curriculum instruction, we start with our mantra of every student every day, and this is no different. I think I'd also be remiss if I didn't kind of put a through line with students finding spaces, and libraries are an important part of that. So just kind of helping that frame the entire discussion, and it's nice to be in a place where everybody is focused on our students, no matter where these discussions end. Okay, so why are we talking about this? Here's a quick timeline for kind of how we got here. specifically with our district review. On November 11th, there were approximately 160 books challenged. On the 14th, the board authorized a district-level review, and we'll talk about that ad hoc committee in a second. We started pretty quickly, so librarians were polled for interest, and the first books were being read on November 20th. The District Review Committee is an ad hoc committee, so it is serving this purpose alone. We had more than 22 volunteers to serve. However, because the books all resided in middle and high school libraries, in those collections, we started with just middle and high school library media specialists. If the challenge were to evolve in any way, we would look for librarians that serve those students as well. I am pleased to say that all of our comprehensive high schools are represented, and good representation of schools across our district. So incredibly thankful for the people that have volunteered to do this. Some details, and at the end, I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to go into any more detail. So there are at least 2 readers per title to try to get some sort of consensus and recommendation, and to not give the impression that any one individual is responsible for a recommendation that has, in their minds, a heavy outcome. If there is not a consensus in that recommendation, so for instance, if one reader or reviewer said to remove and one said to retain, we would then gather a third reader. It would be a blind gather, so they wouldn't know that they were a tiebreaker in any way. If that were the case, and that's not the case on any of the reviews we have tonight, but if it were, that would be specifically noted, and you as the board would know that there was a lack of consensus on that first review. We've gotten a third review, and you would see that specifically outlined. In terms of how we ordered these and why you see these 10 tonight, and is there any purpose behind those 10, there truly is not. The committee kind of asked if there was any order they should take, and we took the approach of, you know what, let's focus on just you choose. So they chose based on what's in their collections. It was anonymous for all intents and purposes. We assigned numbers. So there is no rhyme or reason to the books that are before you tonight. It was based on the ones that they decided they wanted to read first. The expectations based on the numbers are approximately 13 books per reader. So again, some may have additional books to read if there's not a consensus, but about 13 books per reader, and our goal is to have these done by the end of May, so the end of the school year. This is a district commitment. This is also a personal commitment. We are committed to a review process that is transparent and honest, and I'm going to call out a few of the things that I hope speak to that tonight. It's multifaceted, so it's thorough and hopefully informative. As far as the transparency, the titles will always be posted on the board agenda. We will do our best to give the board an update if we, want to chunk certain titles. So I don't know what the magic number is, do you want to do this every board meeting? Would you rather, so we are open to feedback from you on how we kind of organize those, but regardless, the titles will be posted. The public will know what books will be discussed. Also, the summary reviews that are posted for those titles tonight are also on the board agenda. They will always be posted on the board agenda. And again, any discrepancies or concerns that were noted in the review or are something that maybe our reviewers didn't even know about, if there was an inconsistency, that will also be explicitly stated in the summary review. So as far as the tiered approach, we kind of looked at 3 categories, and all of these things will feel familiar to the board, they will feel familiar to anybody that's been following kind of the library book discussion at large. So we've got 3 categories: the Miller test, TCA 39-17-901, that is the obscenity law, so that's not the education piece of the age appropriateness, but that's the obscenity law, and then just general age appropriateness, and we'll kind of tease those apart a little bit. And again, this is the same handout that we went through with our committee. So they kind of received a similar overview, and we answered questions as we went through this. But we've got 3 categories, and you can see that they're kind of split apart there. The first category in the first tier is the Miller test. If a book were to pass that Miller test, it would automatically we would stop the process. So if it is found to be obscene based on the Miller test, we would not move forward in the review. So if, for instance, if it's taken as a whole to be specifically to that prurient interest and meets all 3 of those categories, we're not moving forward. That book automatically, it's already out of circulation, but we would obviously make a note of that to make sure we never purchase that book again. That's step 1. That's obscene. Step 2, if it fails the Miller test, essentially it is not considered obscene, so then we move on to the next kind of bucket of definitions. We spent quite a bit of time kind of talking through these both internally, and you all have spoken about this in a public forum, but these are the definitions that were referenced in the age-appropriate amendment. So that's how they kind of came back into that conversation this year with the whole or in part. So you'll see that at the very top under column 2, where the descriptions or depiction in whole or in part, and then you've got those definitions. So that was kind of the change that caused a lot of this to be discussed. So we're going to talk about one specifically as an example, and we've talked about this previously. The board kind of charged us with looking at a kind of umbrella term of sexually explicit. We clarified some additional expectations in that meeting, but this is one particular term that we talked about at some length with our committee. So sexual conduct, this is the definition as in 3917-901. I have bolded patently offensive. That is not bolded in the law. I bolded that for explanation purposes. But you can see where this is going to be something that is a little more nuanced, and why we were anxious to have librarians put on record their thoughts about these particular definitions. So if a title, for instance, I'm sorry that but if a title, for instance, as you read and review that book, if it gives any sort of depiction or appearance of ultimate sex acts, anal, oral, genital, those are considered under that sexual conduct definition. We have to back up and say, is it just a description or is it patently offensive? The definition for patently offensive is also in TCA 3917-901. That which goes substantially beyond customary limits of candor in describing or representing such matters. Again, I know the board is well aware of these definitions, but just kind of to frame how we were going through this review. If you see in a title that you have read or look at an excerpt and you see a depiction of a sexual act and it said did not meet the definition of 3917-901, if it's something under that sexual conduct umbrella, for instance, it's likely that they didn't find it patently offensive, and you'll probably see a note. So then that gets us to the final column, which is really where our librarians spend most of their time. And I'm hoping that we can have further discussions about the opportunities of kind of moving books and making decisions based on age-appropriate considerations. So these are general age-appropriate considerations. This is how collections are managed. If you see, we'll talk about some numbers and titles on the list that are no longer in circulation or in our libraries. It's because a lot of these titles were weeded naturally through the age-appropriate considerations that librarians and media specialists are going through month to month, year to year. So that's just which grade band is this most appropriate for based on, X factors, which we'll kind of look at. So the reviews that you have before you, you'll see them, they all follow kind of a similar template. At the top, you'll see really district-specific information. So every review will have the title, obviously, the author, then it has current holdings. So this will be the grade band and then number of copies. So if it's currently in middle and high schools, you would see it say middle and high schools. You'll have that for every title. You will then have tier review findings. So if, for instance, there was one that the reviewers said, you know what, this passes the Miller test, therefore it is obscene, you would only see that mentioned, and then we would stop the review. But in these cases, you have 3 tiers of review filled out, gives us some basic overall information, and then the ultimate recommendation. In these cases, they were all unanimous in terms of both reviewers agreed with the recommendation. They both happened to put the same recommendation. I say that. There has not been a discussion between them, and because they don't know who else is reading the book, I will point that out. So that's the recommendation. If there was a recommendation that there was conflict in that, you would see that noted right there, where if, let's say, one said to put it in middle school and up, and one said high school only, you would see some of those considerations highlighted. And then you've got some just relevant notes from the reviews at the bottom under notes from district reviewers. You also have some additional context. This won't be the same for every book, but these are some things that it may include. You'll have peer-reviewed journal recommendations, publisher age recommendations, any national awards that the book has received, and then other context. So is it a part of a series? Were there movies that ended up being made? You know, just some social context. Okay, so now let's get back to the list and kind of talk about where we are in terms of numbers and progress. So the no longer in catalog is going to have a little bit of discussion on the next slide as well, because that's where we found some errors in how we originally reported those to you on what was and was not in the catalog. So a little more on that in a second. But reasons that these books may have appeared on that list and are no longer in our catalog, depending on when those titles may have been searched or not, they can be removed as just part of regular collection management. The title could have just been lost, or it could have been removed per previous district policy removals. So if something got challenged through a different avenue, follow that process, the book gets removed from the shelves, that would have been removed. So we've kind of made note for those on the next slide. We also added, there was that list of 150, and we had another list of 10 from October 17th. The board agreed to merge those lists together. That's where we got that 160. We currently, counting these 10, have 91 titles being actively reviewed, meaning at least one reviewer is reading that book. So you can see we're making, I feel like, really steady progress. So here are some explanations for why you're going to see a discrepancy in what was sent to the board before the meeting and tonight. So we have called every school where these titles may have been and double, triple checked, in some cases more than that. Acceptance, a memoir we originally thought was out of our district because we have learned that when you search in our catalog, if you don't put a space after the colon, it will look as if it doesn't appear. So I will say if you are searching for books, it is sensitive to spaces and spellings and all that, so it has to be specific. So once we realized it in fact was there, we have put that back on the review. Forever for a year, when we had the large kind of push to let's go ahead and pull all these books, the 160 books got pulled from the shelves. We've never done a kind of process like that, and to do it that quickly, we didn't realize we needed specific language, and I will give our team credit that they adjusted very quickly, but within that first hour or so, when they removed them, some people deleted it from the record. So in good faith, but then it got deleted from the record, and we thought it was gone. So upon further calls, we realized those are still, they got removed, but they're on the back shelf, for lack of a better word, behind the counter. So those Forever for a Year and Our Own Private Universe are back on the review list. And The Strange Truth, there was a confusion that is actually not a book title, that is a series title. So we just assumed we didn't have it, but upon further review. So we may have some questions for which books are being challenged, but that's for another day. So those are the ones, that leaves us with those 12 that we can confirm are not in district catalogs, and with the 4 being put back on the review. I hope that made sense. And that gets us here. So what you have before you in your stack of reviews and what the public has as attachment to the agenda are the summary reviews for the 10 titles that you will be considering on Thursday. And we are happy to answer or attempt to address any questions, or if you want any more detail, happy to help.
Ms. Maxwell?
Yes, Ms. Rosales.
Thank you, Dr. Chastain, and everyone for all the hard work. I want to talk about, just really quickly, about the books that were not showing in the catalog. The process that it was done through the Follett, sorry, in the database, because when I did the research, it was under a school, and it looked like it had a record of that title, but I couldn't determine if there was a copy within the school system, and I had the list of the schools that had it. But when you say they were never in the catalog, that's where I get a little confusing, because the way I interpreted in doing my research, there was a profile, or I guess I want to call it a record or a profile of it, that shows up for the book. It doesn't say no results found, because for me, I will think that no results means it's not in the database, not in the system.
It can depend on how it's marked. And again, we've learned more than we knew we were going to learn about this, but depending on how it's marked, if it's going to be in that kind of removed because of one of those categories where it's typical collection procedures, that will still retain the record, but will show that it was removed for one of these things. The district policy is one of those. That's how we would like them to start being, cataloged in terms of, so we know that it was removed for that reason, as opposed to just deleted. So they can be deleted. I will also say that some of these, we have taken the approach of the review process does not in any way limit the librarian or school's ability to make decisions. So if they saw a book, and I don't know this, but let's say that there was the one copy in the district happened to be at my school. I still, as the librarian, can go through and look at that, give it a closer look, and be like, you know what, this hasn't been, they can make that professional decision to remove the book from their circulation, and that could have happened with some of these books as well. And we actually do have a list of each book on this list and kind of what happened. So I'm happy to provide as much detail as the board wants. But there's several reasons why it would look like it could have shown up in a search, and then when we go 5 days later, it may not be there. In some of these cases, it was because we didn't have a space, but it's that finicky. But these have all been triple checked.
So I guess my question is, and this may be a technical thing, and it's just interesting to me because I worked in technology and understand database. So if the record is there, does it mean that there's inventory for it or not? Or will there could be a record but no inventory for the book? Or does it keep up with both?
I would
Does that
say
make sense?
it keeps up in multiple ways, and we can chase this rabbit if you would like.
Well, I'm just saying, if that's the case, what can we do to clean up the system so that if...
And I think I will say that we have looked at several different options for how to instruct our group better on when something like this happens, here specifically how it gets marked so that we don't end up in this situation again. I think that's what you're after, is how does a record completely get deleted?
Yes.
And
So that it doesn't show up in the search results because it gives the impression that there is inventory for it.
correct.
It doesn't talk about the copies anywhere. It just gives, because it's a data management inventory system, it gives the impression that there's inventory. So I guess I'm trying to understand, how can we clean up?
It doesn't mean that there was an error made in the original list either. I mean, it really could be that decisions on how to remove those titles while we were reviewing, and that's why we went back and looked item by item to make sure. But
And I just want to preface this, that I'm not doing this because I want books banned. It's just that I work in the this whole thing about cleanup systems, and that's just my thing. And so it's just like, oh, how can I help you to clean up the system? Like, it makes me really, like, I don't want to say happy to talk about systems. That's the only reason why I'm talking about it. So I just want to preface.
I'm going to bring, if Ms. Benavides can speak really quickly on the software itself.
Hi there.
I don't know where to put you, so.
So sometimes in our catalog, you will see a mark record for a book. But then beside that book, you will see number of copies, and sometimes that will say 0. So the MARC record itself exists, but when that book enters one of our school's catalogs, they would have to go to the right side of the catalog and hit Add Copy. And that static record is brought to that home location. So there is a chance that you saw a MARC record that wasn't specifically assigned to a school.
Even though it showed up within the database of one particular school system.
It's possible, but it would have said 0 copies. And in terms of cleaning up, before my time here, we paid Follett to clean up a series of MARC records that were still laying around but didn't have any copies tied to them, or duplicate entries for the same book. And we're looking into doing that again because our catalog system does need cleanup through those duplicates and leftover records.
Maxwell. Thank you for that presentation. I have a similar question about some of the titles that are not located in the district. Mainly, it's the last three. And all three of those are three that I'd submitted, and they all have three different kind of interesting outcomes. So one was submitted back in February, and it was removed, which is We Are the Ants. YOLO was submitted back in April. It was retained. And then From Blood and Ash was submitted in this latest run, October 16th, but it's not in the system now. You've kind of answered a little bit of the question that I had, was no longer in the catalog, maybe weeded as part of the collection management. Could have been lost or removed per district policy the previous year, which that kind of catches some of that. My question is there going to be notations with these books to prevent a recirculation back into? And that's those specific three, because I know those three have been reviewed. But looking at the ones that were not located in our district, looking at the rest of this list, excusing the 4 that you've already covered, the Acceptance, Forever, Private Universe, and Strange Truth, but the others left on that. Are those still going to be reviewed so they can be notated as to whether they can recirculate back into our system as well? Or are we then, I'm just wondering how we're going to cross that pathway. If they were submitted currently, even though it's currently not in our district, are we going to do anything on the front end, or are we just going to still act on the backside?
This brings up an interesting point, and I will, so I'm open to what the board has to say. We obviously don't want to preemptively review all books that exist. So these books that aren't currently in our catalog are not in our catalog for a reason. Just like items that, as our librarians choose collections, they're items that would never be in our catalog because of that process, obviously. These would be some of those that, whether they were never in there to start with, We Are the Ants was removed per district policy, that's been noted. The YOLO From Blood and Ash also removed per just general collection development. So that's a case of a librarian taking a closer look at those titles and being like, I, as the librarian, choose to remove this from our collection. We could discuss how to, my concern in any of this, I don't ever want to overpromise something on behalf of librarians, even though it's sensible. Like, it is sensible to me to, sure, we can have notations of all this. This is already noted on our home library removal page. So my concern isn't necessarily about these books, it's about any book.
Yeah.
I think that's the main concern, but we can certainly notate any of these that are on this list, not currently in our collections. Those will remain noted on our library pages where we have removed titles, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. I was primarily concerned, obviously, with the 3 that I'd submitted to see the outcome. That you kind of answered that. So I guess, and of course, this board decisions here can give guidance if they choose to go a different route. But that's a consideration that I'd like to give a little more thought to determine what that looks like. I'm with you. I don't think that we should just review every book that never entered our system. So I understand that portion. I'm just wondering if it's a smaller scale. So obviously I think there should be a lot of due diligence done on the front end before we just start throwing books at you guys. But with that regard, on the smaller scale of having well, it looks like maybe eight other books, because 4 of those end up being in the system. You mentioned the search different, those 8 or 10 books left. I don't think that that's too much of a stretch to go ahead and just rework that. But to the second question, I don't know either. That's why I'm throwing it out there.
And I think I'm following your train of thought too, in which reviews are helpful to start creating some sorts of understanding about what the librarians may be seeing in those books that they decided to remove.
Sure.
I think we'll see some of that in coming
Weeks.
titles that come before you. I think the farther we get along, so if you are, we can kind of just discuss this, and then if there's a motion at some point, I don't know that there would need to be, but if you're okay with, let's take these, and if we find others, we'll add them to this list. Let's go through the reviews of the things that currently are in a collection. And then if we have outstanding questions about maybe why these were removed, we can certainly move to that phase of the review, if that.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
I think that's sufficient. My next question to the chair, are we voting on these on Thursday?
Thursday.
Okay, and is it going to be like we've done?
Individual,
Individual vote?
and we will do a roll call vote for.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Chastain, I'm not trying to be picky or anything, but you said that you had challenged the book, for example, YOLO. So I went on the library, remove library materials, and I looked at the books that were removed, and that particular book, and I didn't hear the other 2, wasn't on the list. So I didn't know it was challenged and it was removed because it wasn't on this list. So I looked for books that were not, that made it on the removed library materials.
We have additional information on that specific, any of the titles, but that.
Okay, great. Well, that's why it made it on my list, is because of that. So I just want to give an explanation to that.
So I can speak to the specific book that you mentioned. That book was reviewed last school year through the lens of the law at that time. As of July 1st, we know that law changed, so we would still be reviewing that through a new lens. However, even though that book was retained last year, we had 1 copy in the district, and through regular collection development, they looked at that book and said, it hasn't circulated in 5 or 6 years. It's, not part of our literary canon. It doesn't align with content standards. We're going to go ahead and weed that book. So there are circumstances where books may have been retained for one reason, but may have been weeded out of our collection for another reason.
That makes sense, but I just didn't know that there was already books that were already challenged, because I was just going by the list that were removed.
And it is my sincere hope that having this conversation gives more faith in the process that our librarians are already going through. And like I said, we will go to whatever level of detail the board wants to. This is going to be a transparent process. If there are questions about what's on this list or any future list, we will hunt down an answer and be honest about what has happened.
Ms. Maxwell?
Mr. Tidwell.
I think We Are the Ants is on the list, though. That was one of the third ones.
I have on record that We Are the Ants was removed from our district catalogs on March 1st, 2024.
Well, I apologize, I missed that book. But I did reference this list before I just submitted it. And that one book is not on there. And but I missed one, so I apologize for that.
Any other question, discussion? Okay. Barry, we can move to the financial report.
Yeah, so a couple things. Thank you, Ms. Benavides, Dr. Chastain, very, very nice job. A couple things, and I'll have a handout for everyone on Thursday because we are starting our budget process. So first, our budget for this year is perfectly fine. So as I go over all these numbers, I don't want anybody to panic and think our budget for this year is in jeopardy. Our budget for this year is perfectly fine. But I did just want to give everybody a couple just percentages of when we talk about our budget, and it does connect to bus contract and our teacher salaries. That's why this is a beginning stage. Everything as part of our budget is connected. Last year, and I'm not talking about charter school or anything, this is just strictly our operational cost. is $434,770. So that is our overall budget is $538 million. 400,800,000 of that is salary. So of the 538 million, 400,800,000 is salary. So right at 74%. Salary and benefits. That does not include health benefits. Health insurance is 50,079,000. So health benefits comes in a little bit over 9%. So just in salary and health benefits and all our other benefits, we're at 83.4% of our budget, which is pretty typical. Somewhere between 80 and 85% is where you want to be. Then I just wanted to cover a little bit of some of our other costs. Transportation with our bus contractors is $27,169,404, so right at 5% of our budget. What is unique, and unique may not be the right word, we all aware our General Assembly did a great job in funding TISA, but TISA does not provide funds for transportation. And I think that's very good for all bus contractors to be aware of it. It doesn't provide funds for transportation. So there's no incentive for districts to provide transportation. For a district like Tullahoma, who does not provide any transportation, they get the same amount of funding per student that Rutherford County does. That is different under BEP. And so I asked Mr. Runyon here just a minute ago, you may have seen me word to him, I was like, please check your email. In 22-23, the last year before TISA, you just sent it to me and I wrote it down. What did we receive for transportation?
It was approximately 8.7 million.
We received from the state 8.7 million. And so that is a hard pill to swallow. Yes, TISA gave you extra funding, but districts that don't provide transportation are definitely at an advantage. We always are going to provide transportation in Rutherford County. That's who we are, but I just think that's good for everyone and being transparent to know that's what we're working with. It is not apples to apples across the state. So 27 million is 5%. Utilities are 20.5 million, so 3.8%. So we're now a little bit over 92% of our budget is gone in salary, health, transportation, and utilities. We haven't got to anything with instruction yet. We haven't paid, my favorite one is the trustee. So we pay the trustee a little bit over $3.5 million to collect money for us. So a little bit under 0.5%. Just a couple other ones. Instruction, our budget's $4.5 million. So amazing job for what we do for less than 1% of our budget. Subs are 5.4 million. The trustees 3.5. Workers' comp's 526,000. Legal's under $1 million. Liability insurance, custodial supplies 1.8. So I say all that to say we don't have a lot of things to cut in our budget. We have been able to have a balanced budget the last 2 years. We have said for the last 2 years this will be the year that isn't going to be possible, and that's truly what we're going into. So in looking at next year, we've got a couple things, and again, this year's budget's perfectly fine, so I don't want anybody to lose their mind and think we're going to be in trouble this year. This year's budget's fine that ends June 30th. Next year, what we're looking at, there's a couple changes in state revenue that is going to impact us. One is we'll start with the positives. There should be an increase in TISA allocations. Last year, the governor increased it a little bit, about 3%. If the governor increases TISA allocations 3%, that should bring us a little bit over 8 million. I would say 10 million, but without getting too technical, it's a 70-30 split between the state and local. So it gives us about 8 million extra dollars. The hard part is there's been a change in coding for economically disadvantaged, and so we're going to lose somewhere between 3 to 5 million of what we received this year. So that is a change in how students were coded. I don't think, it's not anything the state has done incorrectly. It went back to how students were coded during the COVID years, and I think multiple states coded them one way, and that's not the way they are coded any longer, and so they don't count for economically disadvantaged. We are noticing the same thing with free and reduced lunch percentages. They are dropping substantially.
But they made a change last academic year to code them differently if they received Medicaid, correct?
Correct, and that's
Something.
no longer the case.
And so then they took that
Yes.
away from, because then that changed all of our numbers with free and reduced and then economic challenge,
Correct.
socioeconomic. So then they changed that, and then now if they, even irregardless if they receive Medicaid or not, then they're coded, how are they coded now?
They would not be counted unless they had something else that TANF and SNAP funds. So they'd have to be a direct serve. Medicaid would not qualify them as economically disadvantaged. So for our district, and we've done a great job in going back and checking, and I know this is really nerdy to our bus contractors, and I'm sorry, but it's just the funding portion of it. But for us, we had about 8,500 economically disadvantaged students. The first run this year was a little bit over 5,300. We're not able to go back and change those. The state locks them at the 15th of every month, but we have updated it. We're a little bit over 7,500 now. That's still a loss of about 1,000 students. And so 1,000 students, it's a 25% increase. You're looking at or 25% weight, you're looking at about $2.5 million, plus the extra 2,000 we didn't have the first couple months.
And I know you don't, I know I always talk about bad meal debt.
Yep.
But how we're looking at with our free and reduced, because they're coded socially economic as well.
It's lower. I'll get the numbers for you by Thursday.
Is it low because of the,
It's lower because of this. It automatically drops students. So, and that's a change, not just in Tennessee, that's nationwide, just a change in coding. So, but it definitely does, and it's a statewide. There are districts that I talk to other, I hate to say it's good that our poverty level stayed higher. That doesn't sound like a good thing to say. Our poverty level did stay higher. That's probably to do with the lack of affordable housing in our county. There are other districts that lost 3,000 and 4,000 students, and they're losing $9 and $10 million. I don't know what they will do. And so, all that to say, we're looking right now to get to a 2.5% raise will be what I present to get to the $50,000 threshold that the governor requests. So that'll be the same we did the year before. 2.5%, we have to open Poplar Hill. We will transfer the largest majority of our positions where we open schools, and we will have to hire like PE teachers, music teachers, front office. It'll be about a $2 million estimate in staffing. We have increased utility fees. Our property and casualty insurance went up $700,000 last year. I imagine it'll go up again this year. I estimate right now being about $15 to $20 million in the hole as we move towards next year without additional revenue. And so that does include some additional bus contracting things. So in looking at our bus contract, just kind of some numbers, every 5% raise roughly that you look at, or 5% increase, you're looking at about 1.3 or 1.4 million, and then the liability insurance is about 1.3 million as well. And so that's 7 million is roughly all of our staff. For 2.5% bus contractors, every 5% you increase is about 1.3 to 1.4, and liability is about 1.3 for what we're guessing right now. But again, that's very early. And I just wanted to bring that up so that all of our bus contractors, everybody knew exactly what we were working with. I do still think that ultimately we'll be okay. We have budgeted in the deficit many, many years before. Ultimately, it comes down to just a philosophy. For example, Williamson County keeps their fund balance very low. They increase their maintenance of effort, but their fund balance stays 16 to 20 million. Different philosophy. Our fund balance stays at about 100 million, but our maintenance of effort doesn't increase. Different accounting philosophy, not sure one's right or one's wrong. The last couple years, we've still been putting funding into our fund balance, or savings, if you will, even though we had a balanced budget. So, do I think we're in the deficit moving into next year's budget? Yes. One of the things I have to talk to principals about, we don't plan on having very many growth positions. We haven't grown as much either. We're down to give you an example of what we grew this last year. I hate to say not much. Compared to where we've been, this doesn't seem like much, but from May till December, we only grew 564 kids. But to the years we grew 2,200, I'll take 564 only in 6 months. And then from December till May, we added 442. So right at 1,000, but at least it's not 2,200. Yeah. So I'll have a much better printout for everybody. I was just over here crunching numbers and let everybody know kind of what we are looking at as we start the whole budget conversation.
Yes, Mr. Sidwell.
Dr. Sullivan, can you send us all the figures you listed?
I will. I'm
I
gonna
was,
have
I was
it.
writing them down.
I will. I had Dawn made one earlier, and then I was going crazy on Excel today, and then I said, never mind, I'll do a different one, so, yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? We'll move on to the director's update.
If parents are watching, and then bus drivers as well, I definitely would watch Weather on Friday. Something that I've tried to do a good job as well as at least in my tenure as being director of schools, try to make the decision as quickly as possible. I will never be perfect, and I will always mess up at some point, but if we ever get to a point where a decision looks like it definitely needs to be made the night before, I try very hard to make that decision the night before. If we send out an anonymous poll to bus contractors, I would appreciate your vote that you would like for me to call instead of James Evans. I'm doing anything I can to give votes. The staff voted me down and said they like James better, so I'm still hurt about it, but I would take any support I can get.
I didn't do a survey this year because I didn't want to hurt his feelings further.
Thank you,
But
thank
we all know the truth. It's fine.
Thank you. But Friday, parents, if you're watching, I would definitely, as the forecast looks, I'd go ahead and start making alternative plans just in case.
Not looking good.
Not looking promising.
Okay, general discussion. Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring tonight?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Vaughn.
I'd like to say, this time of year, in all my years in education, dealing with, there's one group of people that really we need to recognize, because I know of the holidays, Michael Walls and his people in the maintenance department, they go and check on all these schools all throughout the holidays. And when you got freezing weather like this, they go around to all the schools, and boy, they do a tremendous job. We get a lot of bang for our money from most people. I'm telling you, they don't get recognized enough, and we really, I'd just like to pat them on the back for the job they do, because I know when I was at Oakland and the roof caved in out there and it flooded and the library was just almost ankle deep in water. Well, the maintenance department, just the whole group came and just helped, and but they're just a special group of people. And considering the demands and all that they do, we need to give them a lot more respect and a lot more recognition and thanks for what they do, because I'm telling you, without them, we couldn't open schools.
Dr. Sullivan.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly thank Mr. Reed. I know that we have spent more time the last 6 weeks together than I think any director and a school board attorney should ever spend together. And then Mr. Evans and Dr. Martin as well, and then our technology team. But I thought it slowed down a little bit over Christmas, but we talked 23rd, the only day I don't think we spoke was actually Christmas Day. And so I appreciate you, Mr. Reed. It was a good partnership. So hate that we had to do it, but it was a good partnership, so thank you.
Yes, Ms.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to, school board members got the announcement for the Smyrna Annex ribbon cutting, but if parents want to make a note of it, it's going to be January 28th, 11 to 12 o'clock at Smyrna High School. And if you haven't seen the athletic facilities, you need to go and see them. They're some kind of incredible. And we thank Smyrna Ready Mix for
It's worth your trip.
providing that money, because they donated a lot of money. And Dow Smith, that area doesn't even look like the same area anymore. The old brick facade is still there, but they've added other things to it, and you need to go look at it. It's like Ensworth.
It's beautiful.
John Paul II Catholic school.
There's a lot of universities that don't have facilities like that.
You're right. Right. So
Absolutely. Before we gavel out, and we're going to come back in 5 minutes, everyone should have a copy of this. This isn't hard in stone. If you don't like where you're positioned for the GNS radio spot, just let me know, and we'll switch around, and I can take your spot if you need to, or Mr. Vaughn can as well. So, yes, Mr. Vaughn.
One thing I think it was brought to my attention, and I don't know who really needs to check about this, the legal department, whatever, But the other night, when we talked about the rezoning, and we let certain groups choose, have a dual zone, and we felt like everybody that was here, got approval. But there's other groups that weren't here that were left out of the mix. And to be fair and equal to everybody, I think we really need to look at that and give these other people the same option, just because of being fair. Because, I mean, I just believe in being fair to everybody, and we did it for a few. If we do it for a few, we should do it for all. So I wish somehow or another we could take a look at that and find out. I know that we approved the ones that were here. You know, I'm talking about the dual zone deal where they could pick and choose where they stayed or where they went to the new zone schools. But some of the places, because of the zone, they weren't given that dual zone option. And I just think that they need to be given the same opportunity. I know it's a lot of headache. The way it is now, I think we've created an animal and a lot of workload for the principals of the schools involved, because they don't know who's coming, who's not. And they'll know probably by the end of January, but still there's no determining factor. But I feel like it's just unfair to allow a few to do it and not allow everybody to do it that's involved. So.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Tidwell.
I would just like to, I was going to say something about Stewart's Creek High School's band. If you or you know any good friends that would like to donate toward their historic trip, they will be playing at the inauguration. We invite you to do so. We want to put that out as much as possible. But secondly, to Butch's point, and I think his heart's in the right place, on the rezoning, for me, I don't think if you just show up that you're just going to get what you want. That particular night, I took it further than what I'd initially would have thought was necessary, because my understanding of the rezone is that the purpose of it is to fill the seats. And the more dual zones that we have, the greater it is, more restrictive is on the initial goal, which is to spread out the students of the seats. So there was a couple of zones that made sense. I think the Eagleville one, the Blackman, and the Rockville made the most sense to me, but I was willing to kind of compromise to get it passed on the additional. I'm just concerned if we continue down that road, we're going to end up having really pretty much wasted a 2 years worth of information collecting from parents, from data, and everything else to end up with a result that we could have just saved $300,000 and did ourselves.
I agree. Rezoning is tricky, but having a bunch of dual zones is even trickier, because you don't get those students back immediately, and then you do have, the teachers don't know who's coming and who's not going. It was what we needed to do at that night, but I don't encourage this, I encourage this board not to keep doing that, because it's not a win-win. We all lose.
We can undo it. Can we go back and just undo it and everybody go where they're going?
No.
But, you know, it's not fair to do it for one group and not do it for other.
If there's nothing else?
I do have a question. The form for the dual zone, is it on the website? I got asked about that.
It is, it'll be as released. And also, I mean, I'm sure we do every recording of our Sunday message directly on Sunday, but I mean, hypothetically, it's probably in the Sunday message that may have already been recorded as well.
Okay. We're going to gavel out and we'll return in 5 minutes.